Alright, welcome back to MgM. My name is Jimmy. Today we're going to be painting up some Soviet infantry for bolt action. I've had this Soviet army for about 3 years now, and I am finally getting over just how many models are in this box. I've decided to crack this thing open and get to painting, as I want to feature these guys in an upcoming battle report. I'll take just a second to list the paints on the screen here so you can reference that in case you're painting your own. Just so you know, I'm not an artist and I'm not a historian by any means. The goal of all my videos are to help new people get into the hobby, so if you've been somebody like me that has your Soviet army sitting on your shelf for the last few years, or if you're thinking about getting a Soviet army, it's a big undertaking, and what I want to show to you today is it doesn't have to be difficult, and you can paint these guys very quickly and get them on the tabletop. Now, my models were primed black, and I came in with white over the top of that to kind of show me where some shadows are. You can achieve your primer in many different ways. I would recommend something lighter though, like a gray or a white. Now, on the left side of the screen, we'll start with our initial base coat, and I'm going to use the Army Painter's Bony Matter to go over this. This is going to be the miniature on the left. The one on the right is going to take Sand Golem, which I also tested around. A little bit of this mixed in with a little bit of speed paint medium, about 1:1. I think either of these paint schemes will work, as we'll be going over this with khaki gray before it's all over, but what I want to demonstrate is that you can use multiple or different speed paints to achieve this look. The other day I painted up about 16 or so of these models using the traditional method where you would lay down all of your base coats, give the model a shade or a wash, and then go back in and highlight those colors back up. But I just felt that it was a little too time consuming and I needed to do things even faster. And using these speed paints, and you could use the Games Workshop contrast paints as well, or Vallejo Express, it really kind of combines the shade and wash step along with your base coat into one step. And if you're doing these in a line, by the time you get to the end, that first model is going to be ready to go back to, and I have found that that's not always the case when using a shade or a wash, as sometimes in the recesses it just takes a long time to dry. Also, in using these speed paints, I was able to get several painted up in an hour. You can probably paint a single miniature in 10 to 15 minutes, especially if you're batch painting them. The model that you're going to watch me paint today took about 20 minutes, and that is of course with me filming. Alright, with that layer done on the uniform, I moved to Citadel Wog Flesh for the helmet. This is something that I got from Sonic Sledgehammer Studios. I do like the way that this color looks, and I've decided to forego my traditional helmet colors for the Soviets and use this. Once done, we'll move over to some of the accessories that a lot of these miniatures with. This time, for the ones that I use Bony Matter, I decided to use the Army Painter Speed Paint Sand Golem to get some accessories that some of these miniatures are wearing. This one in particular, this rain cape, and I will also use this color for the bag on his back as well. If you painted the miniature in this color, you could easily use an alternative for this just so it stands out a little bit. We're going to end up going over this with tan earth anyway, which is kind of what I want that final color to look like. Once complete, we will bring in the Army Painter's Speed Paint Grim Black, and we'll use this color to get his boots. Up next, we'll use the Army Painter's Speed Paint Burnish Red, and we'll use this to get the wooden pieces of the gun. And again, this is something to where you want to be as neat as possible, but if you mess up, it is totally not a big deal. At this point, everything is easily correctable. The next paint we'll bring in will be Crusader Skin from the Army Painter. It's another speed paint. The majority of these miniatures, you'll only see their hands and their face, so any parts that are showing skin, we will want to get in this color. And this is a really nice base tone. It's going to go into all the recesses and really provide us something to highlight on in future steps. Next, we'll pull in the Army Painter's Plate Mail Metal, and we will use this to get some pieces of the gun. We'll just block those colors in and get those painted up. Again, if you happen to make a mistake or spill here, it's not a big idea. We can easily go back on it with the original colors that are probably still on your palette. Now for the helmet, I do add a little bit of Agrax Earthshade, which is a Citadel wash, and I just kind of go over that to give it a dirty, weathered look. We're going to highlight this back up, but I just kind of want that dark to go around the rim of the helmet. Now up until this point, I have not taken any breaks. I have just painted this model, letting everything dry as I was going through. The uniform, we are going to go to Vallejo Khaki Gray, which tends to be the base color that you find for a lot of these Soviet uniforms when researching. And we are, for this particular one, we are going to try to stay out of the recesses and go around and just give this uniform a highlight, touching all of the areas that are showing at the top and leaving that dark shade in the recesses. For the men that are wearing this jacket, it can be a little more tedious to do. A lot of the models do not have this bit though, so it's a lot easier to go through and do this step. I have moved down to more of a detail brush for this step, but no matter what brush size you use, it's really only about the tip. So as long as you have a nice tip, you're going to be in good shape, and you don't want to water the paint down a lot to where it runs. Normally when we paint thin layers, we want that paint to be nice and mixed in some water or medium. In this particular case, it's okay to go on a little bit thicker as it gives you a lot more control, and you don't want this paint to bleed down into the recesses. Now as you're moving this model around, you want to think about where light would be hitting. For this one in the jacket, it's pretty easy to get those higher spots, but as he is kind of on one leg, if you will, in a running motion, we want to pay particular attention to his knees and other areas where light would be popping the model. You really don't have to overthink this step, because when you're looking at these guys 2 feet from the table and with a lot of models around them, they are going to look just fine even if you do happen to get into some of the recesses. Up next, I'm going to move to Vallejo Tan Earth, and I'm going to be going around and getting the rain cape that we painted earlier, as well as the bag, just quickly giving those a little bit of highlight and a little bit of color variation. Again, we don't have to be particularly careful here. I'm just going through, giving this a little more color to it and kind of almost muting it down a little bit to a more earthy kind of a tone. Next, we'll go back to our Wog Flesh, which is still on our palette from last time. We'll just go through where light would be hitting the helmet and kind of highlighting that back up while leaving a little bit of shade on there in some places where you think it should be. As we move to some of our final highlights, I take Vallejo Dark Flesh as well as Flat Flesh. And the first pass will be with Dark Flesh, and I'm a little more liberal with this, leaving that Crusader skin in the recesses. I get the hands, the fingers, things that are going to be more prominent, and then for the face, you really want to focus on the nose, the cheekbones, and the jaw. There's also a piece of his neck that is showing on this miniature as well. From there, I go into Vallejo Flat Flesh, and I get the knuckles, and then you can put a dot of this on his nose, on the chin, maybe a little dot on the cheekbones, just to give it a little bit of variation there, and it'll kind of help tie in these colors and bring them more to life. Next, we go to the Army Painter's Gravelord Gray, and we are going to use this paint to go over the silver areas to kind of darken those down, and that'll be primarily on the gun as well as the knife that he is wearing. Last, I apply a very light dry brush of Vallejo Iraqi Sand. This will kind of lighten up that uniform just a little bit. It will also give some highlights to the highest areas on the miniature, and also provides a little bit of weathering, almost like dust and dirt has kind of hit the model as they're running to battle. So Vallejo Iraqi Sand is one of my go-to paints that I use very frequently in these last steps. It's probably one of my favorite paints for this. Just remember when you're using a dry brush that you can always add more. If you happen to put too much on and hit the model with it, just use your finger to wipe it away as quickly as possible. For basing, I use Vallejo Earth Texture, and this is the dark mud that they offer. So I may do something to these bases later on, but for right now, I've got them based very simple with just this earth texture, and I think it looks fine for the front that they're fighting in. And there you have it. Following this method allowed me to paint a ton of these models quickly and efficiently, and if you do the same, you'll have them on the tabletop in no time. I really hope you enjoyed the video. This box is an excellent deal if you're looking to start a Soviet army. I highly recommend it. A big thank you to the Supporters Club. Your names are on the screen now. Thank you so much for your support. If you have any questions or anything, feel free to leave those down in the comments below, and we will see you in the next one. Take care.